Hey everybody, it's RJ, your host, and welcome to Hash It Out. In this episode, I'll be speaking with Scott Kenyon of Würk about providing essential business services and resources to meet the specific needs of cannabis companies. We'll also discuss legal workarounds to U.S. federal cannabis banking restrictions and other roadblocks facing the industry, the various strategies and campaigns for nationwide cannabis policy reform, and more. Without further ado, let's hash it out. My guest today is the CEO of the cannabis software and services company Wurk. Welcome to the show, Scott Kenyon. Hello, sir. How you doing today?
Hey, doing well. How are you?
Doing all right. Thank you so much for sitting down and agreeing to have a conversation with me today, sharing all that you've got going on, of course, over at Wurk, and then going into some of the greater cannabis discussion topics sweeping the nation. I really appreciate you taking the time. First and foremost, where are you joining us virtually from today?
I am joining you from Austin, Texas.
Austin, Texas. Okay, right on, right on. I've never been all the way over to Austin, but I hope to get out there very soon now that travel has started back up. I'm ready to get out of the apartment. So
Exactly.
yeah, totally. I'll certainly look you up if I'm in the area.
I'll host you to some good barbecue. Austin is known for its good barbecue.
Okay. I will not turn down a good barbecue opportunity. That's for damn sure. But hey, thank you again so much for having a conversation with me today. I really, really appreciate it. Diving in here, just to share more about what Wurk does for those who may not be familiar. Wurk provides services such as payroll, HR, scheduling, and timekeeping for cannabis companies. Now, since companies in all industries require such services, some who are less familiar, who might be watching this, might ask why specifically there is a need for a company to provide these services, especially for cannabis companies. So right off the bat, can you just tell me how these fundamental business services differ for cannabis companies compared to others in different industries, and how Wurk specializes in meeting the needs of these cannabis companies?
Yeah, great question. I'll start with we aren't different. Our services and products aren't that different for non-cannabis customers. So a majority are not. I'll speak to what is different, but we provide HCM software, HR software. HCM stands for Human Capital Management, and every company outside of cannabis needs that. Where we separate ourselves or different is in payroll. So as you know, due to the federal illegalization and the banking laws around that, most of the payroll companies cannot touch cannabis because they risk their banking relationships. Their banking, say, the biggest of the, Pay.com, whatever it is, Paycor, Paychecks, etc. They do not operate in our space because of their banking relationships. Well, early on, when our founder and previous CEO founded the company, he built banking relationships that allowed us to bring on cannabis customers. So we're able to issue or process payroll for our cannabis customers through a system of banks across the country. And through that, we've built compliance processes, just standard operating procedures that allow our customers to operate within the functions of these regional banks that we have partnerships with. And as you know, because of the federal legalization, it's really hard to do banking, right? So we make it easier for our customers to have banking relationships. 6 years ago when we started this, barely anybody had banking relationships, let alone be able to issue payroll and process taxes through their banks. Fast forward to where we are now, all of our customers are banked. 2 years ago, we had customers that were unbanked still. But we fought hard for each one of those. It could be a mom and pop shop, or a, healthy sized, medium sized business that still didn't have the banking operations they need. So we cracked that code and are able to provide payroll services and compliance, more importantly, right? This is a highly regulated industry. You think of these companies, they're doing everything possible not to break a regulation or get in trouble with one of their state or local, right? There's local, like there in California where you're based, there's local rules and compliance they've got to make sure they're doing, and then there's state. rules and compliances. So our platform simplifies that for everybody. And, I'm happy to share that we moved over $3 billion worth of payroll last year for cannabis companies, payroll and taxes.
Wow.
The U.S. government, they don't have a problem accepting taxes from us, right? They still collect those taxes. So, even for them, back in the old days, owners of cannabis companies would literally go pay their taxes with duffel bags full of cash, and they go down to the tax office and they're like, what are we supposed to, the tax, assessor didn't know what to do with that. Right. So we've been able to crack that nut again and really provide a great solution for our customers and for the industry.
What has it been like to sort of deal with the, I guess, more or less tangled web of regulations that differ so much in different states, in different regions, and even in different cities and municipalities within different states? What is it like to have to juggle all of that and stay nimble to this ever-changing state of regulations, which we're currently in because of, as you mentioned, the federal illegality of cannabis? What is it like to have to stay abreast of the constant moving parts?
Yeah, and I'm going to one-up your question. And on top of that, all of the complications that COVID brought. Right? Because then there was even multiple COVID programs within certain states, within certain parts of states, right? So it's a very complicated business. And what I'll say is our team, we have experts in certain states. So specifically for taxes, we have tax experts, employment tax experts for the state of Colorado, for the state of California. We don't expect our tax team to be experts across the board, right? And then, on compliance, I have a compliance team that is the same thing. They separate by states. We give them a certain amount of states and they become experts in those and, stay attuned. So when our customers, there was a recent change in California law that starts at the end of this month, I believe. But don't quote me on the date exactly, but it made a pretty big change for everybody in the cannabis space and across all industries. But cannabis is always extra nervous because they don't want to make any state regulator give them a reason to pull their license or do anything, wrong. So that's more of the longer answer. The short answer is I've just got some unbelievable team members that become very much experts in local laws, state laws, and just even regional laws.
Certainly, yeah, and it's got to be a full-time job to really keep your ears to the ground and really stay on top of, again, the ever-changing state of regulations while we live in this weird sort of limbo time where states are legalizing recreational or medical cannabis, but it still remains federally illegal. And then there are people on the federal level who are trying to push broad cannabis policy reform. Meanwhile, there are factions of people in the federal government trying to push incremental federal cannabis policy reform, such as legalizing banking services for cannabis companies, which we'll get into in a little bit here. Yep. But sort of in that same vein, I wanted to ask you about this piece of information that was announced by Wurk in September of last year, because while traditional bank loans and IRS income tax breaks continue to be largely restricted for cannabis companies, again, due to the federal illegality in the U.S., it was in September of last year that the company announced it was branching out by helping cannabis companies legally work around federal banking restrictions and other roadblocks facing the industry by working with e-tax breaks to offer access to the COVID employee tax credit, which is, again, something very important, as you mentioned, with the multitude of COVID pandemic obstacles that have arisen. It's considered to equate to providing a benefit to cannabis businesses, which again already face higher taxes and a greater cost of capital than non-cannabis businesses. So tell me more about this, what it means for cannabis companies, and what you're hearing from them in regards to this.
Sure. Yeah, it's been a great partnership with e-tax breaks, and they identified areas that allowed our customers now to take advantage of some of those COVID tax breaks and access to different capital. and it's not across the board. Some of the largest MSOs, multi-state operators in our industry didn't qualify for that, but most of our medium to small businesses all have a chance to qualify for it. And we've been very successful with some of our customers, and other customers are still just going through that process, right? So it is, again, you go to that time, California may have added an extra incentive to keep people working during that time, different from Colorado or different from New Mexico. And those states, some of those states allowed it to be cannabis, cannabis companies to participate. Other states didn't. So it's, again, as everything in cannabis, it's very complicated, but our partnerships with e-tax breaks and our team have been able to figure out ways where we're able to go back and recoup tax dollars, or prevent future, get credits for their future payments. So it's been a successful launch, and that's one example of what we're trying to bring or continue to bring to the industry is partnerships and integrations that isn't typical in cannabis today that most non-cannabis companies have access to. One that we announced recently was our multi-employer plan, and that's short for MEP is the acronym there, and that allows our cannabis companies to right now, if you want to provide a 401k to your employees, you have a single employer plan, so you can't go out there and have a competitive bid. So with a multi-employer plan, think of it like a healthcare system. The more people you have in it, the lower the premiums are because, the averages really do average out. Same thing here. We're able to, one company can join with another company, join our program, and the more customers we have in there, the lower their costs will be, and the 401k advice and management will be much better for their end users, their end employees, than just a single employer plan. So that's an example of, again, partnerships that we're bringing into the industry that are desperately needed. And, as we continue to grow and mature as a industry, our customers expect that, but all of us who are providing services to this industry should be pushing for that as well.
Certainly. And what is it like to sort of, I've said before on this show that when it comes to the cannabis community or when it comes to the cannabis industry, the education and the dissemination of the resources available never ends, because it always seems to be the case that there are people that are trying to enter the cannabis industry that don't know that these sort of resources are available to them. So what do you do over at Wurk to make sure you're getting this message out there to people who are trying to start successful cannabis companies so that they know that these sorts of very important resources and services are available to them?
Yeah, we've been around for 6+ years, and we have a lot of scars on our backs from our learning, right? As do most cannabis companies.
Sure.
If you've been around that long, you've gone through some serious battle wounds.
Yeah.
So when we're talking to new clients, new customers, we're sharing all of those experiences. We're sharing those best practices. You see behind me a Smokey the Bear hat. So beginning of last year, I launched this at an all hands meeting. I said, we've become really good firefighters, and I don't want to fight fires. I want to prevent fires. And half of my staff had probably never even heard of Smokey the Bear. But it's really a thought process is how do we go out and ensure our customers are staying out of, traps that they may fall into, or, just preventing any type of additional work they'll have to do. So that's a big thing that we go out there and prophesize to our customers and our future customers is how we're able to help them take all of their worries away from their HR and payroll needs so they can focus in on their core business. Again, as I've shared already multiple times, it's so hard to operate a cannabis business. Anytime a cannabis company can, we can take any part of their worriness away from them, that'll allow them to focus on their core, which is only going to help their company.
Certainly. And again, shout out to Smokey the Bear. I love that you came with the prop and the reference and everything. And shout out the nation's oldest running public service campaign. So
really?
I didn't know that. Yeah, totally. Only you can prevent the fires that
Yep.
come with trying to run a cannabis business in America before we, of course, have the federal legalization or federal cannabis policy reform implemented here in this country.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it's a big
so,
mind shift change, though,
yep,
right? And even
sure,
as cannabis companies, we've got to be thinking about that. We've
yes,
had to become, everybody's had to be so reactive. You get out of that reactive state and prevent issue, grow and prevent issues that you've learned from in the past. That's only going to be better. And we're an example of that, but everybody in the cannabis community is an example of that. Otherwise, we still wouldn't be around. Your show
that's
is an
such.
example of that, right?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, that's such a good. I'm so glad you mentioned that. That's something I've been pondering recently. Is I feel like in a lot of ways we are a reactionary people
Yeah.
as opposed to a preventative people. You know, it's always we'll cross that bridge when we get there, or you know, we'll deal with that when it happens. But the importance of taking preventative measures can almost be more important than
Yeah.
taking those reactionary measures if and when something does happen, right? So
Yeah.
so important to have that sort of perspective to understand the importance of both of
And
those
and that's
approaches.
part of the maturation of the industry. And I mean, this whole industry is going to be a great business school case study. 10 years from now, you look
Yeah,
back like, wow, they really went through all of that. People won't believe it, but
right.
everybody has. And but it's a natural evolution, and I'm excited to be a part of it, and excited to see it. And people always ask about different things in the industry to me, and the thing I share is we always are going to be making decisions for the better of the whole instead of just, one group. And I would say as a industry altogether, that is still that feeling. Like we want everybody to go win. There's enough market out there to go out there and do that. Someday it won't be that way and it'll become commoditized and really competitive. But right now, there's so much good we can go out there and do that, and so many people that still need access and access to this wonderful plant, but also education on how to utilize it best for them.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I love that. Yeah, the education does not stop in the
No.
cannabis industry and within the cannabis community. Now, speaking of the evolution and hopefully the the evolution of regulations and policies in this country that again hopefully will benefit everybody and not just specific groups. Um, when it comes to the need for the Safe Banking Act in particular, which is a bill that has passed the House, what, 6 times now, and is seeking to implement a piecemeal legislation to legalize cannabis banking services. Here in the U.S., you wrote in Green Entrepreneur in June of last year that many legal cannabis businesses are forced to be cash only, leaving them vulnerable to burglaries, robberies, and violent crimes. And you went on to cite incidents in which companies have been burglarized or employees have even been fatally wounded and shot following confrontations with customers. You also wrote that while large multi-state operators and other big players can afford heavy security, such as armored vans to transport cash and armed guards to protect their stores, smaller shops cannot afford those same protections. And so without access to traditional business loans, some retailers have no way to recover from the damages incurred by burglaries and robberies. So with all that said, tell me about what your thoughts are between the differing campaigns at the federal level, from first legalizing cannabis banking services before broader cannabis policy reform to the reverse, implementing broad cannabis policy reform before legalizing cannabis banking services. In your view, what must come first and why?
Wow, that's such a tough question. I want everything. I want to use a
Right.
baseball analogy, I want the home run,
Yeah,
right? But home runs doesn't always win the game for you, right? It's the
sure.
singles and doubles. Um, I, I, I really want everything, but anything has to pass. Something has to pass. And that's,
Yeah.
we say, what's my priority? Of course, I want safe banking to pass because that's our industry and that's going to help make it easier for our customers, which I'm happy for.
Sure.
That'll also bring in more competition, which is good. That'll make us better, right? That'll make everybody. Competition is a good thing. But honestly, I just want somebody to get on first base. I don't care if it's a Moores Act. I don't care if it's safe banking. I don't care if it's something new that comes up. Like, we just got to get a win at the federal level, and it's overdue. I'm not a lobbyist. I don't really like working with politicians, but I've spent more time over the last year just trying to influence and understand how politicians are really looking at this. And it's a difficult game, and I know they're in a tough situation, right? But at the end of the day, their constituents, their voters are the ones that have to demand it. And that's what I shared to all your viewers. Like, don't let up on the pressure on our politicians. Continue to write, continue to let them know how important whatever piece of the legislation is, let's get through that. Now, on the optimistic side, now we're seeing both sides, the Democrat and the Republican side, starting to support these, which is great, right? That's a very positive sign. But and in my younger years, I used to gamble all the time. I'm not much of a gambler anymore, but I wouldn't bet on one of those passing versus the other right now. Again, I just want something to pass.
Yeah,
and build
I'm
upon
with you
that.
on that. Totally. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I was pondering that question myself this morning, and I came to the same conclusion. My thought was, if I had to choose, my choice would just be something, right?
Yeah.
Like, pass something, change something, like reform something, do something, just at all, we have so many bills coming in: safe banking, the Cannabis Opportunity and Administration Act, or the Chuck Schumer bill, the MORE Act, the
Yeah.
States Reform Act from Representative Nancy Mace. And that's all fine and good. And I like that you mentioned also that it's now a bipartisan issue.
Yeah.
It's not just not just Democrats putting their support behind cannabis reform. It's now bipartisan. Everyone from all walks of life and all political aisles we all agree on this, which is something that in this day and age is hard to come by when it comes to universal agreement on any given topic here in this country. So I would just like to see something happen, whether that be broader cannabis reform or this Safe Banking Act, which implements a more incremental reform. Just as long as we can get something out there to make it easier for everyone who's trying to get, again, this good herb, this plant, this medicine, this whatever it may be, out to those who need it and those who want it, and increase that accessibility.
Well, and it
Yeah,
keeps
please.
getting like, I don't know if your listeners know that recently Visa has been cracking down on what they call cashless ATMs,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
and people don't realize that, but that's a huge impact. One, it's bad for the customer. All these things that make it more difficult to operate in our industry just drives customers to the illicit market.
Exactly.
And that's not good for anybody. That's not good for the government. That's not good for the customers. That's not good for the industry, right? So there's so many layers to this and then on the decriminalization, like I had a woman who came talk to our all hands meeting at our company, and she had served 9 years for a cannabis conviction. And she literally said the first or second billboard she saw as she got released from prison was a dispensary billboard. And can you imagine that feeling? Like, you've been locked up as a young woman for 9 years, and you come out and see, wow, somebody's making all this money off of this, and it's legal. And I just sat my butt in jail for that. I mean, that to me, when I share that story, just saying out loud, I'm like, I want the MORES Act to pass.
Sure.
I jump back and forth.
Sure.
So going back to your point of just something passes has to happen. And I think when it does, it'll turn into that snowball effect, and it'll just things will just start rolling after that.
Yeah,
That's my hope.
Same here. Like, when you have the corporation of corporations, speaking of Amazon, throwing their hat behind federal cannabis policy reform in the U.S., in my view, if we're at that point, I think it's time to start letting out a lot of people from jail for cannabis-related crimes. When you have, Jeff Bezos' company or a Miracle Grow company, or all of these big players now coming into the industry, I think it's time to start letting people out of jail. You know what I mean? Like, that just seems like the logical thing to do. And, you know, I am grateful in a lot of ways, because we are in an era in which this sort of conversation is it's a feasible one. We're at this sort of era where it seems like it will happen sooner rather than later. What form it'll take is remains to be seen, but it does seem like it's a realistic goal now more than ever. Is that how you feel?
Oh, 100%. And, you know, even hearing you say it back to me, I have 2 kids, and I talk to them about, it's not the short-term battle. It's about winning the long-term war, right?
Sure.
We've got to continue to chip away, and look where we are today compared to 6 years ago, right? When the industry really took off. We're in such a better space. Governments are, you know, states, counties are releasing cannabis convictions or criminals, and, you know, it's just, it could happen with the stroke of a pen across this country instead of piece by piece, but at least piece by piece we're getting there. I'd rather have the stroke of the pen and everybody be released, but obviously, you know, making those small steps, those small strides will add up, and they are adding up.
Certainly, yeah.
Momentum is our friend.
That's it. Yeah, momentum, inertia, we'll get it done. That's for damn sure. We got to keep the ball rolling. And, you know, in the meantime, hopefully we'll be able to speak again in the very near future once a federal cannabis policy reform is implemented. But in the meantime, what have you got in the works over at Wurk for the remainder of the year? We're already well into February as we're recording this. 2022, can't believe we've already made it this far, but here we are. What have you got in the works for the rest of the year and in the next few years to come?
Yeah, I think the thing that I'm most excited about is just as I mentioned earlier, the partnerships that we will bring to market and the integrations. You know, as the industry matures, people are coming from other industries and like, oh, why don't we have this in the cannabis space? Well, that's a good question. Let's go figure that out, right? So bringing in those partnerships, bringing those integrations into our platform, again, at the end, will make our customers' days and work life much easier. That's the big thing. I don't have anything to announce yet. I can't announce it until we're ready to launch, but I can tell you can really look forward to some great integration and partnerships in 2022 from Wurk.
Okay, dig it. I like the mystery behind it. Yeah, it leaves something to be desired. Hopefully, when it is public and official, we can rehash it out and talk more about all of that. But in the meantime, we will certainly be keeping an eye on all that y'all have got going on over at Wurk. So please continue to keep up all of the great work to get these great services out to the companies who need them, get the resources and education out there, and keeping our fingers crossed for something to come down the federal policy pipeline. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Scott, for offering your perspective and all that you've got going on. I really, really appreciate it, and I wish you continued health and well-being and safety over in the Dallas area or wherever you may be.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for the time today. Yeah, and I look forward to being back talking about all the successes the industry's having.
Yes, right on. We'll split some barbecue soon.
You got it. Thanks, my friend.
Sounds good. Yes, indeed. Scott Kenyon, everybody. That is it for Hash It Out. Thank you all so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. I'm your host, RJ Balde, and I will catch y'all in the next one. Peace out.